It was a $35 million submersible. It's a titanium pressure vessel, so there's 90 millimeters of titanium sphere in the middle and acrylic surfaces all round carrying the other things that are outside the pressure vessel. It's a very, very hostile environment. The pressure is phenomenal down there. This submersible, which is really only the size of a large car, it had 100,000 tons of force on it. The pressure is immense. That's equivalent to 300 jumbo jets simply sitting on this small pressure vessel.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In Hamish Harding's final social media post, we see the weather featuring prominently, and one can almost intuit Stockton Rush's own swashbuckling bluster coming through. This is what Hamish Harding wrote in his final social media post on Saturday, June 17th. He wrote, "Due to the worst winter in Newfoundland in 40 years, this mission is likely to be the first and only manned mission to the Titanic in 2023. A weather window has just opened up and we are going to attempt a dive tomorrow. We started steaming from St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada yesterday and are planning to start dive operations around 4 a.m. tomorrow morning. Until then, we have a lot of preparations and briefings to do." End quote. First of all, go ahead and Google the worst winter in Newfoundland in 40 years and see what you come up with. You'll see results for January 2020, not mid-June 2023. In the aftermath to the 1996 Everest disaster, and I've written a couple of books on that, the weather and not human error was blamed for that tragedy. In the books that I wrote, I made the argument that it was human error, and here we have a similar ruse. Do you see? If Harding believed the weather nonsense, he could be forgiven for also believing that Mission 5, his mission, was going to be the one and only window all year. And so wasn't he lucky that he happened to buy just the right ticket at just the right time? But the rarefied weather windows on Everest aren't nearly the same as the North Atlantic. I mean, how many days in a year is an ocean surface stormy? Hardly every day. And do you remember Arnie Wiseman's remark from Travel Weekly? He wrote just a month earlier, I think he was part of Mission 3, he wrote, "Wind, swells and fog, sometimes present, sometimes predicted, were the stated reasons dive days were cancelled on my trip with OceanGate in May. But when I was on board the support ship, the Polar Prince, and hoping to go down in the submersible Triton to see the Titanic, I sometimes wondered whether the submersible's readiness was also an unspoken but important consideration. Now, bear in mind a major difference and a major difficulty with not having your submersible on board with you, if you're going to tow it behind you, is you can't go out and do regular maintenance on it. You can't go out and check it all that often. Another big part of the reason Harding was likely giving OceanGate the benefit of the doubt was because P.H. Nargile was too. And he says as much in his final social media post. He writes, quote, "The team on the sub has a couple of legendary explorers, some of which have done over 30 dives to the RMS Titanic since the 1980s, including P.H. Nargile, and of course he had done 37. Wiseman also said he had doubts, and that it was the Frenchman who convinced him that going in the Titan Gate submersible was a reasonable risk. He wrote, quote, "The answer in the moment was the presence of P.H. Nargile. I felt that if such an experienced wreck diver and explorer who had seen and understood so much more than I did, if he was comfortable going down in the Titan, well then I could be too." It's interesting that Harding's final 4 words on his final Instagram post were, "if the weather holds." He wrote, "More expedition updates to follow if the weather holds." One can imagine if the craft itself was defective, the CEO could cover himself both financially and reputationally. He could save face by blaming the weather. Saving face, incidentally, is also part of the psychological fabric on Everest. In the end, the weather did hold, if these final images of the Titan on the surface are to be believed. Now, a month after the tragedy, I think we can say with a large degree of confidence that I don't think you can do a proper analysis on the Titan tragedy without talking about another commercial submersible operation, Triton. And so, without making these apples with apples comparisons, your analysis is incomplete. And so, in this episode, we're going to do that through Hamish Harding going on the Triton and looking at the experience he had. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're enjoying this content, I will be putting several more episodes of analysis regarding this particular story. If you find this episode meaningful, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. Now, to repeat, in order to know what was wrong with OceanGate's Titanic submersible, it helps to compare it to another operation, not just the submersible, but the operation as a whole. And I must say, through British billionaire Hamish Harding, who was also one of the 5 crew lost their lives on the Titan, we were able to get that much needed perspective. Simply glossing through Hamish Harding's social media, we see some of the same gimmicks used by the Triton operation apparently copied by OceanGate. For example, the crushed, signed and graffitied styrofoam cup souvenirs. Also the flight suits or astronaut type apparel with names on them. You've also got a milky white couch cushion shaped submersible with the name Triton on it, and it's kind of got a wavy logo. And then compare that to another milky white teardrop shaped vessel with the name Titan, with a kind of a wavy pattern over it. One pressure vessel is loaded off the side of a ship, the same with the other, except not quite. Where the $36 million Triton submersible was carefully lowered into the sea each time, the cheaper Titan was winched down a ramp or closer to the end of its life, dragged behind the mother ship. I've been trying to find out exactly how much the Titan was worth, but I haven't been able to ascertain that. Now, the only problem with towing a rickety vessel made partly out of carbon fiber on a shallow platform for hundreds of miles to the drop zone was that you might drag it through ghost nets or get the thing banged up, tossed around on the ocean surface while waiting for your precious weather window. Incidentally, the search for the Titan submersible likely cost more than the submersible itself. By some calculations, the search was approaching something like $6.5 million. Now, when one looks into Hamish Harding's story and the submersible part playing out from 2021 onwards, we are introduced to OceanGate's arch rival, Triton, operated by Victor Vescovo. After successfully getting down to the Mariana Trench, although not without issues, they ended up damaging one of their thrusters. The British billionaire asked the American millionaire, Vescovo from Texas, to take him to the Titanic. But Vescovo tells him it would cost millions of dollars, and anyway, he doesn't do Titanic. Guess what? OceanGate does, and for a fraction of $1 million. Not only do they do Titanic, there are several successful missions every year, and tickets, well, supposedly, are selling like hotcakes. Get yours before they're all gone. That's how it seemed from the outside looking in, except when you look beyond the surface stuff, you see how the Triton and the Titan aren't birds of a feather at all. They're not apples and apples, they're more like apples and pawpaws. I think for starters, Triton simply has a heck of a lot more money, resources, reputations, certifications, industry standards, and thus credibility behind it. In comparison, by 2023, the cash-strapped, uncertified Titan was hemorrhaging cash so badly they had to scale down their mothership and give away freebie tickets to influencers. I mean, that was happening this year, as well as offer massive discounts. I think one of the discounts offered this year was $100,000 for one ticket, as well as another $100,000 off another ticket. So in total, $200,000 discount. It's just astonishing to hear Hamish Harding talk so eloquently about the pressures and dangers faced during his 2021 expedition, along with his precise knowledge of the material used. Think about it, just 90 millimeters of titanium sphere. That width is about the average length of a smartphone. That shell is holding off the stack of 13 Burj Khalifas or 300 jumbo jets piled on top of one another. What you also notice with Hamish Harding is a certain fabric emerging. Submersibles, space, the North Pole, the South Pole, Everest. While all of this is impressive, there seems to be something else going on as well, especially if one looks into Harding's 3 Guinness World Records. There's the Guinness World Record for fastest circumnavigation via both poles by aeroplane, a Guinness World Record for longest duration at full ocean depth by a crewed vessel, Guinness World Record for longest distance traversed at full ocean depth by a crewed vessel. So 2 of those 3 records are to do with going deep into the deep ocean. The UK Telegraph in an obituary described Harding in similar terms to Stockton Rush. Quote, "He became better known in recent years for daredevil, thrill-seeking exploits, which brought him 3 Guinness World Records." And then they quoted him saying the following: "People, especially as they grow older, tend to give up on their dreams. When I think of something unusual, I try to find ways to make it happen." End quote. And one kind of gets the sense that he was trying to find a way to make the dive to Titanic happen. In other words, he was trying to think of the glass as half full. What we see is an individual developing a reputation and a legacy based on notching a series of extreme notches on his belt. These include 400 skydives, including on one occasion skydiving with 40 others. Going back to the Telegraph, quote, "But he was determined to set a few records himself. He said, I used to read the book of Guinness World Records regularly as a child. I always wondered how I could get into it. I did not think I could do it. And I didn't want to do something stupid like setting a record for the number of ping pong balls bounced in a day or something like that." End quote. In other words, he wanted to be a badass. One has a sense now of an extreme adventurer who was simply trying to add the Titanic to the notches that were already on his belt. So what if there were a few problems? In an interview 2 years ago, he talks about James Cameron's submersible struggling to get back to the surface, and how recent technology has made it possible to do something extreme, something that wasn't possible for a long time, related to the deep ocean.
Going to the bottom of the Mariana Trench is something that simply wasn't possible a few years ago because the technology wasn't there. The US military managed it in 1960, and they were never able to use that vessel again. It was so badly damaged in the process of getting down and back up again. James Cameron, the famous film director, managed it in 2012, but equally his craft was unable to be used again. He spent a lot of the time down there just trying to get back alive, and only very recently has this 3rd submersible become available, and it can actually go down and back up again without sort of fighting to get back alive. And so having seen this possible, I very much wanted to be on board.
One can also imagine, and here we see another powerful parallel with the 1996 Everest disaster, the fact that there are 2 expedition companies competing for the same market, billionaire tourists like Harding, and it's easy to dismiss the disparaging remarks of one about the other if you kind of a client that is sort of going between the one and the other. You might sort of dismiss it as basically, competitive rivalry. And I think that is probably what Hamish Harding thought privately when his friend Viska Voskova told him, "Don't get on that damn Triton sub." And when Arnie Wiseman told him, and they reconnected with Harding at the Explorers Club Global Conference on the Azores island of Terceira, that was days before the fatal dive, he already knew that Wiseman had been on the mission and hadn't made a dive. He knew that there were problems. And so Harding even asked Wiseman, tell me what your impressions were of the Ocean Gate operation. And so Wiseman said, I told him candidly. He, meaning Harding, raised his eyebrows. I said that I thought many of the problems with my non-dive may have arisen because this was the first season that the Triton was being towed behind its support ship rather than being kept on its deck. I said I thought the sub and platform were being tossed around pretty roughly on a daily basis. But a seasoned explorer, Harding didn't seem overly concerned. End quote. Probably Harding figured the Triton had made 20 successful dives to the Titanic already. In other words, it was a proven quantity. Probably he thought if Stockton was going to go down himself with Harding, well, that had to mean Stockton believed in the safety of his vessel. And probably what Stockton had said about Boeing and NASA meant it was safe. Probably. When it came down to it, it was a roll of the dice, and Harding had been doing a lot of that lately. Why did he do it?
But that has inspired me to sort of go, challenge deep, well, why not? There is now a submersible that can do it.
We've barely scratched the surface with Hamish Harding's story, so if you'd like me to take it further than that, let me know in the comments. Thank you for listening. Have a great Friday weekend, and I'll see you guys next time.